You're listening to Empowering Testimonies of Faith with Coach Jeff Connors. Join Coach C, USA Strength and Conditioning Hall of Famer and Certified Health and Life Coach every Monday night at 7 for Empowering Testimonies of Faith as diverse individuals from various professions share their personal journey, leading them to spiritual strength through surrendering themselves to Christ. Coach Connors aspires to influence others to choose a healthy threefold lifestyle with spirituality as the powerful foundation. Now, here is Coach Connors.
Welcome to Empowering Testimonies of Faith with Jeff Connors. Tonight, our incredible guest is Leslie Schlachter, now Chief Physician's Assistant at Mount Sinai Hospital in the Department of Neurosurgery. She otherwise is known as, in clandestine locations and across the internet world, as Brainy Leslie. And she also has quite a background in collegiate and pro basketball. Brainy Leslie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So I hope I didn't slaughter the name Schlachter.
Not at all.
Okay. And so I wanted to talk maybe a little bit about how we first met. And I was in Nashville with my wife at a wedding, and we ended up in the same gym in the hotel. And basically, I was noticing that you were, whatever you are, 6'4", 6'5".
I'm 6'4". Yep.
6'4". And I was like, wow, that is a tall woman. So, I was kind of amazed. And, you were going through your workout. I figured you were either a professional volleyball player, basketball player of some sort. But we got to talking, and I had an opportunity to maybe introduce you to a couple new kettlebell exercises. So,
yeah, that's exactly. You were noticing me, and I was noticing you, and I walked right up to you and I said, "Who are you? What do you coach? Teach me something. Teach me something." And you did. You did.
Cool. Well, as you know, this show is about stories,
right,
and testimony, and your story is like so perfect and so accomplished. I don't know what you have testimony wise, but you certainly have done a lot of things right. So I wanted to start with your story as a young athlete, a young girl. I'm assuming you grew up in the New York area.
So I'm originally from Connecticut. I'm from a town called Newington, Connecticut, right outside of Hartford. And I grew up, my mom and dad together. I had an older sister, and we, grew up playing sports. My parents put us into every sport you can imagine. And they said, when you really like something and you want to keep going, let us know. So I went through everything from tennis to swimming. I was a tap dancer for 10 years.
Wow.
And soccer. And I picked up basketball. I started playing basketball when I was 13, just about between 12 and 13. I'm 6'4", and I've been 6'4" since I turned 13. On my 13th birthday, I was 6'4", and I hadn't played basketball, but I was, in the grocery store with my mother, and this guy walked up to me and he said, "Who are you? How old are you? Where do you go to school? And can you play on my church team?" And that's how I started playing basketball. So I played basketball for my school, for my club AAU team. I played for Newington High School in Connecticut. And my entire middle school, teenage years through high school were spent studying hard and playing hard, because my goal was to be a Division I basketball player. And that's where I kept my focus. My focus was on hitting free throws, taking layups, doing post moves, and studying. And that's what I did all through high school until I did play at George Washington University. And we were a top 25 D1 my whole 4 years there. So my whole upbringing was revolved around, mostly around basketball, from what I can remember. Nights and weekends, all basketball.
So going back to high school, who ended up recruiting you? What schools did you visit?
So in the beginning, every school sends you a letter. This was back in, I'm 45. So these were the days that you got letters in the mail. There was no email. There was no email. There was no cell phone, no texting, no Instagram, no Snapchat, just snail mail. So I received a lot of mail from every school. Literally, I think almost every D1 school and some D2 schools. And then when it finally came down to it, when coaches can start calling, the schools that I kind of whittled my way down to were West Virginia, Delaware, Boston College. I was interested in Bentley, which is a Division II program up in Boston. They were, the top team in D2 for many years, and I really loved their coach. And then George Washington. So those were my visits. And University of Miami, I also visited as well. But I really wanted to be in a city. I wanted a good balance of an incredible academic program, but also athletics. And that's how I ultimately chose GW, but big schools.
Yeah, and I had been, associated with football pretty much my whole life. And so I had a very, I guess you could say, unique and interesting experience. What do I know about women's basketball? First of all, not much. But, at UNC Chapel Hill, I was asked by Coach Hatchell. I don't think I think I told you this story, of course, but we'll go ahead because I want to tell you again. But Coach Hatchell came up to me, and I was also told that I needed to take a second sport because I oversaw the department at the time, but I worked obviously with football, and you get 125 guys or whatever, so you don't have a whole lot of other time. But she asked me if I would take women's basketball as my second sport. And she said, I want you to train women's basketball the same way you train football. So I had Ivory Latta and a whole bunch of other all-stars. And it was a very interesting experience. I said, well, I got one request, and that is when I have them in the football weight room, I don't want any trainers or coaches in there. I just want to be in there with them myself. So if you want me to train
basketball, much smaller team, a lot more manageable for one person.
Yeah. So, if you want me to train them like football players, I can do that. So, we lifted hard, we lifted heavy. We did a lot of speed work, of course, as well with that. But it was a great experience because I traveled with them some, and I ended up traveling to 2 Final Fours. And I got 2 Final Four basketball rings, and we won the ACC every year that I had them. I'm not sure how many times they've won it since then. I'm not even sure they won it since then, but I got 6 basketball rings, so that was pretty crazy.
That is cool. Actually, I don't think I told you this, but when you're being recruited as a D1 athlete, the phone rings every night, and you're talking on the phone all night. And you do have to start telling people when you're not interested or you've already made your list. The night that I made my list and I cut it down to my top 5, and I put it on Post-its by all the phones in the house in case somebody else answered other than me. And right when I made my decision on my top 5, about 10 minutes later, one of the assistant coaches from University of North Carolina called me. And I'm like, darn, just a couple minutes late.
Well, you would have done great there.
Yep.
So outside of that, why GW? I know you had high academic standards also. What were you thinking through high school as far as what your vision would be academically and what you wanted to maybe study or what kind of job?
I wasn't totally certain, and I wanted to have exposure to everything. I knew that I was interested in medicine. I just wasn't sure that I would have the wherewithal to be pre-med and be a Division I athlete at the same time. It turns out like that would have not worked out for me. I wanted to be in Washington, D.C. because I wanted to be exposed to all kinds of people. Where I grew up in Connecticut, I was exposed to, it was very sheltered, definitely no diversity there. So when you're in Washington, D.C., you're getting a lot of diversity from the United States, but also a lot of international students. And they had really incredible schools for anything that I wanted to study, which ultimately I did choose studying business. I did try to get into chemistries and bios and all that. It just didn't really work with my schedule for basketball and training. But I wanted diversity, city, top basketball program, top academics, and it just checked all the boxes for me. It was pretty simple. And it was however, it was the only school with no football team, Jeff. I don't know what it's like to be in college with a football team. It's very sad.
Well, you married a basketball player, right?
Yeah. Yes. I married a basketball player.
Yeah. We'll talk about your family a little bit later, but, how many students went to GW?
I think undergrad, it's like at that time was about 10,000. I think it's like 10 to 12,000. It's not small, but it's definitely not a big school. It's medium size.
What position did you play?
So I was a true center in high school, and going into college, I was a true 5. And then my junior year, a freshman came in there was a girl that came in that was about 6'5", another girl that came in about 6'6", and I kind of switched over to being more of like a power forward. So, but very comfortable playing a 4-5, a power forward, mid post, short corner, high post, very comfortable with that. But really all I did in high school and like my freshman year in college I was just on the post all game, every game.
How far did your team make it to? Like Sweet 16, Elite 8, what?
Yeah. So we went to the tournament 3 out of our 4 years. And we made it to the year before I got there. They went to the Elite 8 or Sweet 16. I can't remember. And we made it to the second round.
Yeah. So I guess I have to ask you this. What's your take on the transsexuals being participating in the sport of women's basketball?
I don't mind this question at all. Hold on, let me just turn this off. I don't know how this is still on. Okay. So regarding transsexuals in basketball, it's actually not so straightforward. A lot of people think this is a black and white issue, meaning it's man and woman. And in medicine and in human bodies, that's not really how it always works out. There are women who are born, they look like me, they go through their life like me. They might have breasts and a vagina and they function their whole life thinking they're a woman, but don't know that they have testicles inside, right? So I think that if their genetics are skewed, meaning it's just unknown or it was a surprise to them, that's really difficult because this person went their whole life actually thinking they were. Like that boxer who turned out to actually, like it's a female, and she has all the female parts, but she actually has pelvic testicles like inside. It came out like this summer. I'm blanking on the name. So I want to put these in 2 separate categories. There's men who know they're men, they're born a man, they have man parts, and they have sex change operations, go through hormonal changes, and want to play as a female. I really struggle with that because during their formative years and their growth, there's a lot of testosterone that they're exposed to that can put them at an advantage. I'm not saying it does put them at an advantage, but it can put them at an advantage. So, and then there's women that grow up, function their whole life thinking they're women and come to find out they actually have more testosterone or they have a male part that's giving them more testosterone. Ooh, I struggle with that. So if I were to make it black and white, it is if there is someone who was born a woman, thinks they're a woman and went their whole life thinking they're a woman, it turns out they have some male parts in them that are giving them excess hormones. Well, then I believe that they can go through either surgical or medical castration. So medical castration is you basically give a medication that cuts their testosterone down to less than 50, which by all intents and purposes, that puts you at like female levels of testosterone. However, for someone who was born a man, knows they're a man, had man parts their whole life, wants to have a sex change and go and function as a female athlete, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm really not.
Gotcha.
However, I will say that this whole advantage thing is not totally true, because some of these athletes aren't as good, as strong, or as big or thick or tall as women. So when people say blanket statement, they have an advantage, I don't think it's so straightforward.
Yeah, and I can see that more for basketball, a little bit, because at Carolina, these girls would seek out men to come and play against them a lot.
Yeah.
And that was something they did pretty often. They just, I don't know, these guys were just, they weren't players, at the collegiate level, but they were decent basketball players, and they'd come and play against, our team. Well, interesting. So what degree did you end up getting at GW?
So I graduated with an undergrad in business administration, so bachelor's in business, which I'm really grateful that I have my degree in business, not pre-med or science background, because it has kind of given me more of a business mind in my life as a medical professional. So that was the perfect road for me.
Gotcha. And what do you think was your toughest and also your most rewarding experiences in collegiate basketball that you can recall?
Not being the best. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. I've never been the best. So I've always been, second best, third best. In high school, obviously, I was the go-to person that felt really good, but there was a girl on my team who always scored more points per game or had more assists. And so I was the second best, right? Best in my position, but second best. And so there was always a shadow, right? I was always in somebody's shadow. And then in college, I knew immediately that I'm not going to be a star. I knew that I was just, one of the girls on the team. And that was hard for me to know that even with my work ethic, with how hard I worked at everything, I just did not have the same level of skills as some of these other girls. And so being a bench player was difficult. However, the lesson that taught me to know my role and to do my role to the best of my abilities has given me the key to be successful in my life now out of college. I think that was the exact road I was meant to take, so that I know what it feels like to work as hard as you possibly can and still, not be good enough, which I know sounds crazy, right? Like, I got a Division I scholarship. I played college basketball. I played professionally overseas, and I still was never good enough. But everybody wants to be the best, and not being the best is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Gotcha. Well, moving out of college then, how did you end up playing pro basketball, and, what was that league? And, tell me a little bit about that as far as, how
so
I
was playing in a basketball tournament in Israel, and a coach scouted me there and offered me to come play professionally on Maccabi Tel Aviv, which is one of the top division basketball teams in the country. So I played in the Israeli league the year after graduation, which was an absolute highlight of my life. I loved living there. As a 21-year-old, I was in Tel Aviv. It's a great party town. I had incredible teammates. Traveling to play professional basketball was only a dream. And it became a reality that those are some of my best memories doing that. And so it was kind of a stroke of luck.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I've got a lot of curiosity there. Just tell me a little bit about Israel. I've always wanted to go there, of course. I think everybody does. But just tell me a little bit about your experiences there outside of basketball.
So Israel is a state that's essentially the size. It's in the news. Everyone hears and knows about Israel now. It's a state that is about the size of New Jersey, and the north of Israel borders Lebanon. The whole west coast of Israel is along the Mediterranean Sea, and the south of Israel abuts Egypt. And it goes from beautiful mountains. There's mountains and rivers and lakes. The whole west coast is just beautiful beach. And it's like your typical Mediterranean type vibe. Beaches where people are playing and their sports. It looks like, your typical Miami or LA beach scene is what it actually looks like. And then in the south of Israel is a town called Eilat, which is a beautiful beach town that you can actually, on clear day, you can see over to Jordan. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a holy land, Jerusalem in the east, where people from all different religions come together and usually very peacefully coexist. It is a land that is equal parts spiritual, religious, but also like just really fun.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, this is a Christian show, but you're of the Jewish faith.
Yes.
And which is very interesting to me. But based on, I really would like you to just speak to what happened there a little bit, and just tell me about your feelings, and just tell me about your faith a little bit, and what God has meant in your life.
So Judaism, there's a lot of different levels, right? So there's people who are Jewish. In Judaism, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish, even if you don't practice, right? So anyone who's born to a Jewish mother, we look at them as they're Jewish, right? We'll take them. You don't have to practice Judaism. You can be Jewish without ever going to synagogue, which is our church, or being religious on any level. Then there's Reform Judaism. So I won't go too much into this, but Reform is probably the lower end of how religious and how much you practice. Conservative, modern Orthodox, and there's Hasidic and higher level Jews, right? That a lot of people that live in Jerusalem are extremely religious. So I was Reform growing up, and I am conservative now. And, right now, Judaism isn't a religious part of my life as much as it is a spiritual part of my life. I identify as being a Jew, and I care about Israel. So when you said you mean about October 7th is what
right.
You wanted? Yeah.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking, right? So just to take that a step further, when I moved to Israel to play basketball, my flight left around 6:45 in the morning on September 11th, 2001. I was one of the last flights out. And leaving to move to Israel, these issues are not new. These issues have been going on forever. And my parents were uncomfortable. I don't know how we feel you being there. There's garbage bombs. People are getting shot and killed. There's bombs all the time. And so when I landed in Israel, we knew something was wrong on the airplane. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what happened until we landed. And so when I landed in Israel and heard about the Twin Towers coming down, in that moment, I realized, no, first of all, no one's safe anywhere. Terrorism can happen anywhere. There's hate everywhere. So what happened on October 7th, although it's awful and terrible, this is not new to the Israelis, to the Jewish people in Israel. This has been happening forever, right? I fear it's not going to be fixed. I just think it ebbs and flows throughout the years and throughout the decades. And sadly, the people of Israel are used to it, which is, pretty awful. So October 7th was catastrophically awful. And everything that's happened continues to be. It's all terrible, for all lives lost. And I am not sure how this could ever be fixed. The hatred runs deep.
Gotcha. I've had a few other women on the show recently, and this whole thing with kind of, and empowering is part of the title of my podcast, obviously, but I've been noticing that this term empowered women. I had an actress on here recently, a model and so forth, and she was on the cover of Cosmo or whatever, and was in some other magazine, and was voted one of the 20 top empowered women. Well, do you consider yourself to be an empowered woman, and what does that mean?
Well, I think anyone who is, if you consider yourself an empowered woman, you're one of the lucky ones, because that means that you probably are, and you have the wherewithal to feel that. I think there's a ton of empowered women out there that are empowered. They just might not know it, and they might not act that way, but to other people, they're empowered. Empowered can mean a lot of different things. Empowered could mean working hard and doing everything in your power for yourself and the people around you. It could be advocating for a specific group of people for a specific reason, or a large group. I think that in order to truly become an empowered woman, you have to go through something. You have to have resilience. And the only way to build true resilience, unfortunately, is usually to have something bad happen in your life. I lost my sister when I was 21. My sister was murdered in front of me in my childhood home. And going through that was the worst thing that could ever happen. Now I can think of a million other things that could happen, but to have to go through something so tragic with my only sibling, and not only mourn her loss, but also learn to recover and value life after that, was very difficult. So I feel like for me, from that moment on, I not only feel like I'm living for myself because I truly understand how valuable life is and how quickly it can be lost, but I also feel like I'm living for her, right? So if there's something that I'd want to do, or something I want to be good at, or something I want, it's not just me asking or doing, it's me and my sister. And I feel extra empowered because I feel like I have that extra person next to me, like that angel on my shoulder. So I think being an empowered woman is caring for something that's important to you or people in your life, and doing the actions it takes to support that, no matter how hard it is. And speaking up, even if it doesn't benefit you. That's I think, what it means to be empowered.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I know that's not easy. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
So getting back to, I'm kind of curious, because you had a degree in business. So now you are
in medicine.
So you did have a degree in medicine.
Yeah. So I played basketball in Israel for a year. When I left Israel in the end of April, and my sister was killed in May, and I was in my off season. I was home because the season had ended, and I was going to gear up and get ready to go back at the end of August for my second season, which never happened because I was in therapy and dealing with the court case. The guy that killed my sister ended up taking a plea bargain and going to jail, but we were in court for over a year after that. So that there was a lot of logistics to handle. And during that time, I eventually, when I started working, I took a job for Pfizer, and I was a pharmaceutical rep. I actually was the Viagra girl. And as I was working as a pharmaceutical rep, I took my post-baccalaureate classes, which are my prerequisites for PA school. So I did all of my my pre-med after college in preparation to go to PA school. So it was completely separate.
Gotcha. Okay, so the brainy Leslie, and that's your handle on Instagram, right?
That's my handle. Yeah. So I started my career. I've always worked at the Mount Sinai Hospital, which is one of the big hospitals in New York City. It's here on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It's part of Mount Sinai Health System, and we have hospitals all over the area. But I started my career in urology, specifically men's health. So I spent several years dealing with patients with bladder cancer, prostate cancer, kidney cancer, erectile dysfunction, urinary issues. And I'm really grateful for my exposure to urology, because urology is one of the medical surgical specialties where it's equal parts medicine and equal parts surgery. And so that really gave me the clinical, surgical, procedural, and just communication skills that I needed in order to excel where I eventually ended up, which is now neurosurgery.
All right, time out right there. Let me ask you a question while I'm thinking about it. So I helped take care of my mom and dad. They're 89 years old. And tell me, like, what happens with the UTI? What makes you like delusional?
Yeah. So as you age, there's just a couple things that are very common that can happen, right? So tissues break down, the tissues on your skin, the tissues in the genital region, everything just changes, and you become a little bit more predisposed to getting things like pneumonia, skin infections, and urinary tract infections. Young people, when they have a urinary tract infection, have symptoms. So women have urinary frequency, urgency, burning with urination, might even have blood in the urine. It's very common for a woman to get a urinary tract infection because our urethras are so close to the outside of our body.
Right.
Men, when they're younger, men have penises, which are longer length. So it's a little bit more difficult to get a urinary tract infection, but usually have symptoms. As people age, urinary tract infections are often asymptomatic, which means you don't have symptoms. So sometimes the first symptom of a geriatric patient having a urinary tract infection is by the time it's already made its way into their blood, which is called urosepsis. And usually the first symptoms is cognitive changes or delirium. They literally go crazy. So if an older person goes to the hospital with new onset mental status changes, the first thing you got to look for is a urinary tract infection.
Gotcha.
It basically poisons their blood.
Well, thanks. I've had some experience with that, not myself, but with my father a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but he's doing fine now, so I'm thankful for that.
Thank goodness. But so urology is where I started. One of the beautiful things about being a physician assistant is the difference between physician assistants and medical doctors. When medical doctors complete their medical school, they go into residencies, so they choose a specialty. So someone becomes an internist or a gastroenterologist or a dermatologist. Physician assistants graduate from school with a PA degree, which means they could pick any specialty they want. So I started in urology, and when I felt like I wanted to move on, I switched into neurosurgery. And I've been working in neurosurgery almost 10 years now. I work at the Mount Sinai Hospital with our chairman, Dr. Joshua Betterson, who is a brain specialist. So we do skull base and cerebrovascular neurosurgery, specifically like brain aneurysms, brain tumors, anything that can happen around the brain, at the base of the skull, or in the blood vessels.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about neuroadaptation specific to athletics. So we have some degree of plasticity in relationship to becoming more fast twitch in nature,
right?
Which might include synchronization or the firing rate, or maybe the co-activation of agonists. Can you just speak to that to some extent?
So neuroplasticity, the neuroplasticity that most people speak about when it comes to neuroscience are ways that our brain can respond well or poorly to like environmental toxins, foods, external forces, right? You're talking more about how we can use that same concept of plasticity and make it benefit us, right?
Yeah, being able to activate more
Yep.
motor units.
Yep. So typically in kids, right? Other than like we're talking about like extremists in like Texas with football, typically kids are playing sports, right? They're going out, they're playing soccer, maybe they're doing, soccer, tennis, baseball, whatever. In order to activate all the parts of your brain, like reflexes, balance, rapid movements, it involves a lot of different activities and exercise, including, a lot of it can be mental thinking about things too, right? So when I was in college, I'll give an example. When I was in college, we had weight training, we did some plyometrics, and we ran and we played basketball, right? Nowadays, people know that there's yoga, there's Pilates, plyometrics, heavy weightlifting, lighter weightlifting. People are utilizing swimming. There's visualization. There's working with coaching psychiatrists. There is so much more that we know now that can help an athlete become the most well-rounded athlete. There was only a handful of people that knew that back then. You were probably one of them, Jeff. But in order to fully integrate all these incredible things that we can do with our body, the best time to do it is before your brain is fully formed, which is like up to 25 years old. Now, after that, it's still plastic. It's just not as plastic, right? The most neuroplastic our brains are in our formative years, our younger years. And then anything that we try to accomplish after the age of 25 is so much more difficult. So I think really tapping into things like this to make someone like elite athletes, it starts very young, Jeff, very, very young. And young kids, there's only a handful of kids out there that are like this, like the Serena, Venus Williams, Tiger Woods types that know that they're going to be outstanding. And then any effort later in life, it's still doable. It's just more difficult.
Yeah, what I always believed, and I still believe, is that sprinting provides more tension to the muscle and connective tissue than any other training that you can do. Full speed sprinting.
Yeah.
So that was always first for me while the neuromuscular system was fresh. And that in itself can actually help you to become more explosive in the weight room as well because of the adaptation. So that's one thing that I always really believe very strong in, because I was really big into speed development.
But the athlete has to actually do that, right? So right. If you tell an athlete, if you want to go from A to B, you want to be great, you want to be one of the best. Here's a list of things that you have to do to get there. There's no guarantee that they're going to sprint their 100%. There's no guarantee, like they don't know what their max is. Some people really don't know how to train like that until they get much older. It's not common to work your hardest.
Yeah, the biggest word is intent. Intent to move the bar as fast as you can, no matter what weight's on the bar.
Yep.
And that Tendo units helped us to monitor that to some extent. I use Tendo units a lot through my career, but of course, when you time people, you have an idea of how fast they are. What's their fastest 20 time or 40 times, so forth. But now you have people being measured in miles per hour.
Right.
So there's a whole lot of feedback out there. Sometimes I think there's maybe a little bit too much feedback, and the coach is not coaching; they're just looking at numbers.
Yeah.
Where I felt like I could tell as much about an athlete as a lot of these newfangled type things, because I was with those athletes all day.
Yeah, you know what? None of this technology or none of these apps can tell you. Grit. The most important thing is grit. Can't measure grit.
No doubt. You're talking my language now.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's about people becoming more twitchy. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
And that's what force plates are being used to determine now as well. So anyway, let's move to memory. Is memory improvable once you lose some?
It depends on what the etiology of the memory loss is, right? What's the underlying cause of the memory loss? Memory is improvable if there's no like organic, real physiologic reason behind it, and if the person works at it, right? So there are neurologic diseases out there and conditions that cause memory loss. That's irreversible. There's conditions out there that memory loss can be improved with treatments, interventions, medications. But if we're talking just like basic memory loss, it can absolutely be improved. We know that the health and the function of the brain are improved when you sleep, you get out like the appropriate hours of sleep, and everyone is different. Women need more than men. Eating healthy food, hydrating, taking in enough water. Like these three things I'm talking about, healthy food, water, and sleep, is most Americans can't do that properly. So, and then exercise and like lifting heavy weights, bulking up your muscles, preventing sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, exercise is one of the best things you can do for your brain health. So yes, memory, if it's just, aging, memory loss, it can be improved with those basic things. And then things like actually, like my husband's amazing at it. He does like word games and crosswords, and you have to actually challenge your brain. So the same way, if somebody said, I want to be able to run a mile in under 7 minutes, you can't just go out and run a mile in 7 minutes. You actually have to practice. It's the same thing with memory. If you want to work on improving your memory, you have to work hard at it. You have to use your brain. So the basics, and then actually working at it. And it can be done as long as there's no reason behind it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I believe every morning I do this crossword puzzle. It's helping me.
Another thing that's actually really helpful, it seems kind of counterintuitive and obvious, it's writing things down. So if you have a bad memory, and what you do is you keep a notepad, and I have a lot of patients, with the conditions that I treat and managing my patients, the biggest fights my patients have, the biggest issues after their surgeries is like they fight with their family and friends for not remembering things, because brain fog is very common. You have to write things down. So when you get up in the morning, write down what you want to do that day. Write down what your plans are. If you think to yourself, oh, I have to remember to call the dentist, you're not going to remember. Write it down. When you write something down, even if you don't go back and look at it to prompt your memory, you're more likely to remember. So writing things down is the best thing you can do. If you find yourself asking the same question over and over again, it should probably be on the first page of your notebook.
I believe that 100%, no doubt. And I'm still looking to write another book, so maybe that'll help me.
You should probably get a notebook. Start writing things down.
So I wanted to talk to you about dementia and stroke, and what I've studied and what you just told me are pretty much the same thing in relationship to sleep.
Yep.
Citrus, fiber, potassium. What do you think the best source of potassium is?
I mean, food is the best source, but getting potassium, getting everything through food is the best source. That can be very difficult to do for some people. Being educated and knowing about food is not very common. And I've learned with taking care of a diverse group of patients that there are some people that think there's absolutely nothing wrong with eating toast for breakfast, pasta for lunch, and pizza for dinner. However, that's not a well-balanced diet. Yeah. So the best way to get it is food. But if you can't, there are really great, excellent multivitamins out there that can give you what you need. There's really good fiber supplements, multivitamin supplements, as long as you're getting it from a good source.
Do you think dementia is a vascular disorder?
Dementia, there are types of dementia that are vascular. So there's multiple different types of dementia. Vascular is one of them. So just the basics. Okay. So think about your brain. Think about your brain kind of like a tree. All right. So brain's up in the head. You put your fingers here, you can feel your carotid arteries. Bum, bum. The pulse that we check to make sure someone's alive before you do CPR on them. In the back of the head are your vertebral arteries. So you have 4 main arteries that feed your brain that bring in oxygenated blood under high pressure from the heart. The heart's job, get that blood up to the brain under high pressure. Assuming these arteries are intact, they're then branching into smaller blood vessels, and smaller blood vessels to feed the entire brain. So the blood vessels up here are the tiny branches of the tree. The blood vessels down here, the trunk of the tree. As people age, two very simple things happen that you cannot help, right? So for example, Jeff, I look at you, I see a couple wrinkles and white hair. I can assume you're probably not 21. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Look at me. I mean, I'm Botoxing and use Retin-A, but you can also assume I'm not 21 when you look at me. It's the same thing with the brain. When you look at a brain on a CAT scan or an MRI scan and you see a nice, poofy, full brain with good blood flow, you know it's probably a younger person. When you look at a brain and the brain has shrunk, that's atrophy, just like muscle. When you see atrophy and a lot of little white dots, you know that's probably an older brain. So just like you can look at a person's outside, you can kind of see their brain if they're older also. So brain atrophy happens, shrinking brain.
Yeah.
And microvascular ischemic changes, which is blood vessel death, tiny, tiny little blood vessels that die off in the brain. And the brain is like a kidney. You know how you can donate a kidney and still live?
Yeah.
Right? So you can lose a whole bunch of brain and still generally be pretty fine. So if your brain is atrophying and you have a lot of microvascular ischemic changes, you could be pretty fine. You can be pretty with it. But there's only so much that the brain can handle before you're not so with it anymore. So, you know, like you're just like, oh, they're getting old. They're a little, yeah, that does happen because the brain is truly slowly dying.
Do you believe you can reverse plaque?
You can reverse plaque.
And that is by becoming a vegan or what?
Oh, fun topic, right? So let's separate these things. And I will say that the last time, because I was in urology and neurosurgery, I do not specialize in cardiac disease. So before anyone attacks with what I'm about to say, the information that I'm coming at with is just a couple of years old. So something might have come out that's different. Okay. Just because you have plaque or high cholesterol doesn't necessarily mean you're at a higher risk. Cholesterol is not giving you a higher risk of bad things happening, right? There's a lot of reasons bad things happen. I have patients who look like a walking heart attack. They're obese. They have peripheral vascular disease. There's like their legs are purple. Their cholesterol's through the roof. Their blood pressure's through the roof. They're living forever. And then I have someone who walks into my office that looks great, just ran a marathon, and they die of a heart attack, right? So probably one of the biggest predictors of bad things happening is your family history. You can have squeaky clean blood vessels. So so a plant-based diet obviously is wonderful because it decreases a lot of the measurable things, right?
Right.
However, people who are keto that eat a lot of meat are not at higher risk of having cardiac events. They might have higher cholesterol, maybe, but they're not at higher risk of having cardiac events.
Yeah, a lot of things. And I don't think a lot of people know that there are two different types of LDL either.
Right. And there's more than just total cholesterol and LDL. There's a lot of other testing. So getting a calcium score, looking to see if you're at risk of having a coronary artery occlusion. Obviously, you don't want to have so much buildup of plaque that you're at risk of your arteries closing down. But that can happen in someone who's vegan, pescatarian, keto. So when it comes to diets, lifestyle diets, not like dying in it to lose weight. When it comes to lifestyle diets, I think the well-balanced diet is probably the most appropriate out there. But people who go on specific diets for specific health reasons, usually there's not that much of a difference.
Yeah.
However, a ketogenic diet is the most brain protective, limiting sugars and carbohydrates.
Yeah, I mean, I try to eat well, and my I just see that general practitioners are so quick to prescribe statins, and statins are going to screw up your mitochondria, which is not good.
So I'm on a statin. I have familial hypercholesterolemia. I eat well, I'm fit, my cholesterol is very high. Now, I could just not worry about it and not take a statin. But I did my research, and I'm one of the lucky ones that tolerates it really well. I've had no side effects from it. I've been able to exercise and function at wonderful levels. I feel lucky, and not a lot of people can do that. But I will say one of the biggest reasons I did start taking a statin is fear. Like I even though I did all the research, I do fear, having a cardiac event or something.
Right. Gotcha. Well, I had straight zeros on my calcium test, so I was happy about that. But
that's wonderful.
I'm always concerned about LDL, though. I mean, mine's a little high, but it's when I study that there's two types. I want to get that blood test where I know the difference between the two and see what the one that's 20% is, the low density.
Right. Yep.
So anyway, I'll come off of that. I was kind of wondering what your typical day looks like.
Every day is a little bit different. So I'm clinical and administrative. So I see patients and I help run the department. So Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays are typically clinical. I see a lot of new patients. So one of the most common things I do clinically are meet the patients that just found out something's wrong. So imagine someone who's been having really bad headaches. They go to see their primary doctor orders a CAT scan. They see something on the CAT scan, they get an MRI, boom, they find out they have a brain tumor. So if you were to call the doctor and say, hey, I've been having some sinus trouble, and they say, no problem, the doctor can see you in 2 weeks from now, you take the appointment. If you call the doctor's office and say, hey, I have a brain tumor, I just found out I have a brain tumor, and they say, we'll see you in 2 weeks, you're going to have a panic attack, right? You need to wait 2 weeks with a brain tumor in your head. So I do what's called a new patient intake for a lot of our patients. And that's where I either meet them in person or on televisit. I go through their imaging with them. I ask them questions and I triage what's going on with them. If it looks like a small benign brain tumor, I can often reassure them at that time that this is nothing to worry about. It's almost like, think of it like having a wart. We're just going to keep a close eye on it. You're okay. This is the plan. And I can get them in that direction. I actually just took a phone call yesterday from someone who was scheduled to see me on Tuesday, but he called the service because he's going blind. And I did a visit over the phone and I sent him into the ER and he's having surgery tomorrow. So my job is to triage people who are in like urgent or emergent need, and kind of near future need, or to calm people down and tell them where they're going, and getting them into the surgeon appropriately. And then I do a lot of follow-ups and post-ops. I do assist in surgery. So Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays are very clinical. And then Wednesdays and Fridays are administrative, making sure that all the nurse practitioners and physician assistants I work with, everything's running smoothly.
Gotcha. What are the symptoms of a tumor?
Ooh, that depends on the tumor. So there are site-specific tumors and non-site-specific. So site-specific symptoms and non-site-specific symptoms. So your frontal lobe, which is here, is mostly responsible for, executive decision-making, behavior. So let's say someone had a big tumor in their frontal lobe, might have no symptoms for a very long time. So then ultimately they could have mood or personality changes. If it's sitting low on the base of the skull, they can have loss of sense of smell, vision changes, tumors that are near your motor strip. So if a tumor is right over here on the right side, it can cause weakness or sensory changes on the left side. So the right controls the left controls the right. So opposite sides. Occipital is vision. So depending on what the brain does in that location, those are going to be the symptoms that the patient experiences. If the tumor is near a nerve, we have 12 cranial nerves that control a lot of what happens up here, like vision, smelling, tongue movement, swallowing, hearing, facial movement, facial sensation. Tumors that push on those nerves will literally tell you where they are because of what the symptom that the patient is having. So oftentimes, if I have a patient coming into the office or sitting in the waiting room, just going to greet them and bringing them into my office, I can usually tell where their tumor is. And then non-localizing symptoms are things like headaches, seizures, anything that takes up space in the head can lead to like a headache or a seizure. So it all depends on where it is and what it is. There's benign tumors. The most common kind of brain tumor is something called a meningioma, which is a benign tumor. And some of them don't even need to be treated. The second most common type of tumor is a malignant brain tumor that is usually terminal. So it's all over the map.
Gotcha. So neuropathy, dizziness, all that kind of stuff.
Well, dizziness can be anything. There's lots of things that control our vestibular system or give us a sense of dizziness. And then neuropathy, if it's bilateral, meaning both sides, like people who have neuropathy on just both their feet, it's usually not brain related. Because if something's brain related, it usually picks one side of the body, or it doesn't just choose the feet. It's got to choose a lot of other things too. It doesn't just localize to something just like that.
Gotcha.
Are you saying that because you have neuropathy and dizziness, Jeff?
No.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what the symptoms are.
Yeah, it really is all over the map. What I tell people is it's normal for a healthy person to have headaches every now and then, to have weird itches and twitches and zings and weird things. Normal to have floaters. It's normal to have eye twitches. It is normal to have weird stuff happen in your body as long as it comes and goes and stays away. If you have a new symptom that shows up and it keeps coming back and it's persisting, you have to go get it checked. I'll give an example. I'll just give a couple examples. Visual loss is one of the most common things that people have, acute visual changes that they say, oh, I thought I was just getting old. Significant mood or personality changes. If you're just all of a sudden, if you're getting up every day, Jeff, putting yourself together, putting on your sweater and you're going to the gym and you're doing all your podcast, and then all of a sudden you don't care about the podcast, you're not hitting the gym, you're not shaving your face, you just don't care about life. That's a mental status change. That requires a workup. That's not okay. Hearing loss, one-sided hearing loss, weird eye, tongue movements. There's also anything that pops up that does not get better, got to get checked.
Gotcha. Well, before we wrap it up, I'd like you to just talk a little bit about your family. And because I know your kids are involved in athletics and academics and go to high-level institutions. And, tell me a little bit about that.
So my husband actually has got a pretty cool job. He works with Major League Table Tennis, and Major League Table Tennis they've got teams all over the United States, and I think they have 8 teams now. Forgive me if I'm wrong. There's 8 teams in major cities, and they have tournaments. They travel and they play, and so Major League Table Tennis, aka ping pong, is a really big thing. Racket sports are a really, really big deal. You asked me before, can you improve memory, right? Racket sports like table tennis or ping pong are one of the best things that you can do to have improved longevity in life, cerebellar function, balance, and coordination. And it's fun. So one of the biggest predictors for living a long, happy life is actually just socialization and fun. So racket sports are a really big deal. So he works with Major League Table Tennis, and my son is a freshman in college at Colgate, and he's a basketball player. He's not playing basketball there, but he is on the women's practice team. So he's one of those big, strong guys that gets to beat up on the girls during practice, which he's excited about. And my daughter is a sophomore in high school, and she is an elite volleyball player. And she actually just got back from a tournament up in Albany where they won the gold medal. And her hope is to play college volleyball, to play a sport just like mom.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And
before you wrap it up, what's your best lift these days, Jeff? Tell me what lift you're most proud of.
Well, I got a gym in my garage.
Yep.
And basically,
you've texted me pictures of your home gym before.
So I have a squat machine, because I still want to make sure that I squat, because that's my number one, because I believe that it keeps your testosterone up, it keeps your hormone levels up. And so, I can still, I have it's a long story, but I had a grade 4 separation in my right shoulder. So that's kind of arthritic, but the pendulum squat machine has a yoke, so I can use that. So I did somewhere around 440 for a set of 10 not too long ago, and that's pretty good with an anterior replacement in my left hip.
Good for you. That's really good.
So that's what I'm proud of. And the guy that did my hip, I'm really, he's awesome. It was a guy at Duke, and he came up with this thing in England that he does with the hip. He had a special table, and I don't know what all, but I can barely even see my scar, so it's awesome. But
all you need to know is that it worked and you're still squatting.
Yeah, so that does work well. And so I still train in all my muscle groups, but I don't try to bench heavy anymore. But I've got quite a few different.
I just saw a guy like in his 70s tear his pec from lifting heavy bench. Like at some point you gotta that makes me nervous. Well, like I say, as long as you can keep hitting the weights, everything in your life stays in place.
Yeah, I'm not going to ever quit that. So, but I have different ailments from time to time. You know how it is. When you get up to 68, you don't know what's next.
I'm 45 and there's always a joint that hurts. When I go to the gym, I'm like, all right, which muscles are sore and where do I not have pain today? And that's where I'm going. Well, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I really appreciate it. It was nice to spend time with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this information. And I know a lot of people are going to benefit from it. So thanks a lot. And I'll be talking to you sometime soon.
Sounds good, Jeff. Thanks.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Join Coach C, USA Strength and Conditioning Hall of Famer and certified health and life coach, every Monday night at 7 for empowering testimonies of faith, as diverse individuals from various professions share their personal journey, leading them to spiritual strength through surrendering themselves to Christ. Coach Connors aspires to influence others to choose a healthy threefold lifestyle with spirituality as the powerful foundation.